Hey y'all, let's practice writing some equations of lines and inequalities. So the first one we have is to write the equation of this line on number 1. We have the graph and it asks for the equation in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So we need the m and we need the b. To find the m from a graph, I need to find two perfect points. That's perfect and that's perfect. So let's count our rise and run. Now when we count our rise, we need to be careful. Notice you're skipping by 2's here. So every space is worth 2. So I have 2, 4. And my run is also worth 2. So plus 2. So my slope is 4 over 2. If I simplify that, I have 2 over 1. My b is my y-intercept, which in this case is -6. So all I have to do is take those and plug them into my equation. Y equals -2x plus -6. And that's your equation. Number 2 says a line that has an undefined slope and it's going through the point 5, -3. So undefined slope tells us to use this word vux because of the u. Now vux tells you you're going to be using the x variable. Now if we look at our point, our x is 5, so our equation is simply x equals 5. Now if you're not convinced by this, you could always graph it. If I put a point at 5, -3 on my graph with an undefined slope, which means it's a vertical line, I can draw it through there. Now on this line, notice all of your x values are the same. They're all 5, so x equals 5. Alrighty. Now number 3. This time we have a horizontal line, so that means we have HOI, which tells me we're using our y variable. Well, if you look at this line, all of your y's are the same, and all of these y's are equal to -4. So our equation is y equals -4. Okay, let's go back up to number 4. Now we have a line that's going through the points -3, 7 and 5, 7. What most of you tend to do is to make a table with this, and that's absolutely fine. We have -3, 7 and 5, 7. Once you throw this in your calculator, you're going to get something like y equals 0x plus 7. Well, notice in your table, your y's are all the same. So we could have just saved time and noticed that and known that y equals 7. Because we know 0 times x goes away, so this also just leaves us with y equals 7. Alright. Number 5, a line with a slope of -5 that goes through the point 2, -8. So we have m equals -5, and we have this point 2, 8. Now I have a point and a slope, so I'm going to use point-slope form. Which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And now I'm just going to plug in. This y1, this 8 goes into my y1, and this 2 goes into my x1. So I have y minus 8 equals my slope, which is -5, x minus 2. Now they want it in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So I need to do two things. I need to get rid of my parentheses, and I need to get y alone. Let's get rid of our parentheses first by distributing. So y minus 8 will stay the same for now, and I have -5 times x, and -5 times -2. Those double negatives make a positive 10. And then I add 8 to both sides. So I now have y equals -5x plus 18. So that's my equation. Now some of you really like to make tables, and that's okay. So if you chose to make a table here, you could totally do that. Our slope would be negative 5 over 1, so you would subtract 5, add 1, and that would give you your same equation. All right, number 6. Write the inequality shown in the graph below. Write the inequality shown in the graph below. Apparently they really want us to do this. And then what's the inequality in slope-intercept form? This is still the y equals mx plus b idea. Sometimes when you have the shading, I find y'all forget all of your stuff. The only thing that's changing is this equal sign. So let's leave that for last and fill in everything else. To find our m, we need 2 perfect points. It looks like that's perfect, and I think this one's perfect. So we have minus 3 over 1, so our slope is negative 3 over 1. And it looks like our b equals negative 1. So let's fill that in. We have negative 3x plus negative 1. Now notice this is shaded up, and my y's are getting bigger when it's shaded up. So if my y's are bigger, that tells me my inequality sign is going to be eating the y, or my y's are greater than. Now I have a dotted line. So I leave my inequality like that because it cannot be equal if it's dotted. And that's my answer. Okay, let's turn over. Number 7. Write an equation in slope-intercept form for a line passing through negative 3, 1 and perpendicular to 3y minus x equals 6. Well, perpendicular goes back to that song. The numbers are flipped and the signs are opposite. The numbers are flipped and the signs are opposite. The numbers are flipped and the signs are opposite. These are perpendicular. Cool. So to flip my numbers, to flip my signs, I first need to know the slope of this equation. To know the slope of that equation, I must solve it for y. So I'm going to add x to both sides. So I have 3y equals 6 plus x. And then I need to divide each piece by 3. 6 divided by 3 gives me 2. Plus, now x divided by 3 does not give me 3x. You really have an invisible 1 there. So I have 1/3 x. This tells me my slope is 1/3. Which means my perpendicular slope is, the numbers are flipped, so I flip my numbers, and I change my signs from a positive to a negative. Now, to get my equation slope-intercept form, I need to go back and use my point, my x1 and my y1. We have a point and a slope, so we can plug this into the point-slope form. Y minus 1 equals negative 3 times x minus negative 3, which is a plus. To get it in slope-intercept form, I have to distribute. So the y minus 1 stays the same. I have negative 3 times x, which is negative 3x, plus negative 3 times 3, which is negative 9. Add 1 to both sides. And we find out that y equals negative 3x plus negative 8. Again, you may be a person that likes to make a table. If you do, your table would look like this. Negative 3, 1. We use our slope, our negative 3 on the y's, our 1's on the x, and we would get the same equation. I encourage you to do it however best fits your skills. Alrighty. Almost there. Write an equation in slope-intercept form for a line passing through the point 4, negative 8 and parallel to 4x minus y equals 5. Parallel tells us they're the same slopes. Well, to find the same slopes, I first need to solve this guy for y. So step 1, subtract 4x from both sides. That leaves us with negative y equals negative 5 minus 4x. Well, I don't want negative y, so I need to flip it. So y equals 5 plus 4x. This tells me my slope equals 5, which tells me a parallel slope would be the same, which is 5. I have my point, I have my slope, let's plug it in. So I have y plus 8, y minus negative 8 equals 5 times x minus 4. I can distribute. So I have y plus 8 equals 5 times x is 5x, minus 5 times 4 is 20. And then subtract 8, subtract 8. So y equals 5x minus 28. Again, if you chose to make your table, that's cool. It would look something like this. For negative 8, you add 5, add 1, and you get the same result. Now, I don't know why this says inequality. It's kind of weird. It's an equation. Nothing here to suggest an inequality. Y equals 5x minus 28. Okay, let's go back up. Write an equation in slope-intercept form for a line that passes through 4, negative 2, and it's parallel to y equals negative 7. Oh, well, I don't have an x here. So this must tell me hoy, because I only have my y variable. Well, if I'm parallel, I'm going to stay in hoy, which tells me to continue to use that y variable. But I want to go through this point. Well, at this point, my y is negative 2, so that's my equation, y equals negative 2. Now, if you're not convinced by that, that's okay. We have a line at y equals negative 7. I want a parallel line to that at 4, negative 2. So it looks something like that. Alrighty, let's look at the next one. Write an equation in slope-intercept form for a line that passes through negative 2, 3, and it's perpendicular to y equals negative 5. Alright, we have one variable again, so we're using hoy again. But we're perpendicular, so we don't stay in hoy. Instead, we switch to x, which tells us to use the x variable. Well, in my point, my x equals negative 2, so that's my equation. Again, if you're not convinced, that's okay. I will draw you a picture. So we have our xy. We have a line at y equals negative 5. And then we have a point at negative 2, 3. And now we need a line that is not parallel, but it's perpendicular. So this is going to look like this. Well, this line goes through x equals negative 2. So that's my equation. Okay, last but not least, let's read about Harvey. Harvey rode his bike 12 miles in 1 hour on Tuesday. On the next day, he rode his bike 24 miles in 2 hours. Let h be the number of hours he rides and d be the distance traveled. If Harvey continues at this pace, write the equation for the relationship between the distance and time in slope-intercept form. Beautiful. I love it. Good job, Harvey. All right, so they tell us he rides 12 miles in an hour on Tuesday, and then he rode 24 miles in 2 hours. So let's make a table of this information. We have an x and a y. Our time or our hours is going to be our x, and our miles will be our y. Well, in 1 hour, he rides 12 miles, and then in 2 hours, he rides 24 miles. Well, you have a table with 2 points, so you can put it in your stat edit. So go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do it. Don't wait for me to do it for you. So we find out that y equals 12x. Pretty good, but not quite. They tell us to use the variables d and h. Well, if we look back here, our x is with the h, so everywhere you see an x, it becomes an h. Everywhere you see a y, it becomes a d. So our final equation is d equals 12h. Okay then. I hope that was helpful to you. It is now time for you to complete your post-assessment.